Okay, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining me today. This is Dr. Annette Feravich here with Healthy Mind, Body, Spirit. And we are starting our episode number 4 for a healthy mind. So, again, Dr. Annette Feravich with Healthy Mind, Body, Spirit, and you can find me on the internet at www.healthymindbodyspirit.net. And I am hoping that you are following me along on these different episodes for what we are calling a healthy new you in 2022. Hold on just a minute. I am trying to always find. Doesn't look like I have it here anymore. There we go. Let's do that. Okay, so hopefully you have been joining us for our series, A Healthy New You in 2022. And we are really serious about this because we are really trying to give you some good information. And look we are already here in March and we are still talking about a healthy new you in 2022. Now, why would we still be talking about that mid-March and going into April? Well, basically because what we are doing is we are presenting to you what we are calling, there we go, what we are calling a part of our second part of our series. Part 2 of A Healthy New You in 2022 is a healthy mind. If you remember, we started with a healthy body. And even if you don't remember, you can always go back and look at my live videos. Now, they're not edited yet. I'm going to keep doing that. As you know, I am an instructor at a local university, which is neither affiliated nor endorses what I do here. Nevertheless, it is my main priority. And as it is my main priority, I keep some of these things on the back burner. Why am I doing these video series for you? Why am I bothering to take my time out of my busy schedule to do these video series for you? And even start this new business, a healthy new you and healthy mind, body, spirit. Even start this new business. Why did I do that? I did that because as you may, if you are following me, know that I find that a lot of people, and especially young people, are really hurting right now. And given that I'm older and have some experience, especially with psychological difficulties, which include things like your body and your spirit, I really feel like I've got enough experience and education to really help a younger generation hopefully get themselves in a better position maybe than our generation left them, for example, right? Okay, all right, so this is then part 2 of a 3-part series. Part 1, a healthy body. Part 2, a healthy mind. And part 3 will be a healthy spirit. And so let's just take a quick look again at what our broad agenda is. So, part 2 is a healthy mind that we are taking a look at. And here was our agenda. So we are on March 20th, and we are talking today about lies. Take a look at that agenda. Again, we started introducing a healthy mind for episode 1. We talked about healthy mind therapy is what we're calling it. Actually, we're calling it transformational therapy. So that was an introduction to the different types of therapy that I have to offer. And underneath here, you will see many of the links again for therapy. Much of this therapy is available and it is free. We're going to call it spiritual discipleship. If you want to get some kind of spiritual discipleship free of charge, you can take a look at those links and you can get that. Now, we know that a spiritual perspective is very important for all of us. It helps our minds and it helps our bodies, but not because we're fooling ourselves. We have a really strong innate ability to find out when we are fooling ourselves. And that's something that we're going to talk about today. Because why? Because we are talking about lies today. So taking a look at that agenda, last week you can see we talked about triggers, right? And if you want any information about some past videos that we've had, please again make sure that you see my website, but you can also email me for more information on any of these topics. I really am an expert in many of these areas, not simply because I have a PhD in social, cognitive, and developmental psychology, but also because I have educated myself and taken numerous classes to refine my knowledge in nutrition and health, as well as spirituality and health. And that's what makes my knowledge base a lot different than almost every other therapy. If you are looking for things like mindful meditation, that's exactly what I teach in my positive psychology class. So they are things that I know, but what I know is how to integrate many of those therapies into a healthier mind, a healthier body, and dependent on also a healthy spirit. Okay, so last week we talked about triggers. So take a look at that, because what is a trigger? A trigger is a $500 reaction to a $5 problem, if you recall. That's how we defined it. And take a look at that video to see what happens when we get triggered, how we end up then, what our triggers are based on, and how we end up defending ourselves when we feel triggered. Now, why are we talking about lies? They seem so inconsistent with one another, right? But not really. Our triggers, when we have such a deep reaction to something that we've experienced or something that somebody else has said to us, when we have this kind of reaction, what it comes from, we know, is it comes from wounds. And many of these wounds are from past experiences that we've had. Okay, so the other thing that we know about these wounds is they are not only based on past experiences, but these wounds also drive us then to act in ways that we very typically wouldn't or ordinarily act. Why? Because we lash out and we become defensive. What we know, and this is so key, what we know is that when we lash out like that, when we feel these triggers, we know that they are based on lies. So that is what we are going to be talking about today. We're going to be talking about how is it that our triggers are actually based on lies. And isn't that a wonderful thing? If our triggers are really based on lies, well then all we really need is a little bit of truth in order to overcome those lies. And so that's what we're going to be looking at. What are those lies? Where do they come from? And let's talk just a little bit about what happens when we overcome those lies with a little bit more truth. Okay, just give me a second. I know that the last time I've had some difficulty with the fan that I have here and giving me a lot of background noise, so I am going to go turn off that fan for a quick sec. Okay, I'm back. All right. So triggers, when we feel these triggers that are going on that are so deep within us, that cause us to react in ways that we normally wouldn't react. The good news is that is not based on truths about ourselves, but that, get my collar over here, but that is actually based on lies we believe about ourselves. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about how these actually are representative of lies. All right. And as we move on, we're going to talk more deeply about those lies and how we can overcome the lies that we believe. Okay. So moving on, this is giving us some real critical insight into the things that we do that we regret later on. So listen up so we can get that great insight. Okay. All right, so what we're going to talk about here is we're going to talk about blatant versus hidden lies. When we are talking about blatant lies, we are talking about very overt lies, lies that many people know and would not deny that they are lies, right? And we see this getting confused, though, all the time, right? So what individuals are considering to be clearly misinformation is not so clear to other people, right? So there are times where individuals blatantly lie about things, that they are very overt about them. They are not undercover. They are out in the open and they are lies. Typically, when we lie in that way, it usually is because we don't have a vested interest in the truth. All right. So if we can lie blatantly, and basically more so than that, when we're talking about a blatant lie, more so than that, what we are saying is that we have knowledge that we are lying, right? We have knowledge. And very often, if we have knowledge about our lie, then what we do is we have some kind of motivation for that lie, right? So there is some motivation that is a greater factor in the situation or in the event than actually telling the truth. And again, a lot of times that comes from being dismissive to the person that I'm talking to. And nobody's making a judgment about this, right? There are times where we are going to be dismissive towards other people because we have emergencies, right? If I have an emergency going on right now, I might not give you the time of day, right? So there are all kinds of reasons why we might be dismissive. But when we are dismissive, let's see if I can get this to look a little bit better. But when we are dismissive, what we are saying is that there are other things that take a lower priority, people, the truth, right, that take a lower priority than my reason for my lie. Okay? All right. So we want to talk about that, right? We still need to be able to recognize blatant lies, whether or not, because they're not labeled, this is a blatant lie, right? So there still may be some investigation that needs to be done, even though it is a blatant lie, even though this lie is not hidden, right? We still might need to do a little investigation. Might not be part of my knowledge base, right? All right. And so that's one of the things that we want to talk about. We want to talk about how we begin to overcome these blatant lies and even these hidden lies. Okay? All right. I want to write something down. I got to go get my pen. Give me a sec. know that whenever I decide to write something down, that's actually for this show, right? That's actually for what I'm thinking about, that I want to make sure that I bring up. Much of this stuff, as you can see, I do it on the fly. I don't have a lot of real preparation or a preparation for a script for me, although I use my PowerPoints as an outline. And so Holy Spirit driven, that's what I'm kind of hoping for, a little bit of Holy Spirit driven, but also because a lot of this information really is fresh and new, and so we got to keep it coming to you. We just got to keep this information coming to you, whether or not it is completely perfect or completely edited, right? So, or my hair is completely perfect or edited. All right, so blatant lies, we need to address them, even though we think that we would be the type of spirit or a person to uncover blatant lies. After all, they are blatant. Why wouldn't we? There is a lot of introspection that needs to be going on, even in uncovering or recognizing blatant lies, right? There may be a whole bunch of reasons why, if a blatant lie comes from our boss, we might not want to confront our boss, right? So still some consideration that needs to be done. All the consideration is not about hidden lies, because blatant lies and what we choose to do about those blatant lies are highly tied to our honor and our integrity. What we decide to do about blatant lies are highly tied to our honor and integrity. Okay. All right. I'm a human. I get these. I feel like they are Holy Spirit driven, but being a human being, I need to write some of this stuff down. Okay. All right. So, and then there are hidden lies, right? And hidden lies, what do we have to say about those hidden lies? Well, those hidden lies can be based on, for example, biases. And all of us have biases. I have, so these are pieces of information, and they can be relative to processing, the way we cognitively process something, or even emotionally process something, right? So we can have these biases that are related to the way that we think and the way that we feel, and uncovering these is difficult because we do not have what is called the ability for introspection of these internal processes. Okay, so what does that mean? What that means is that there are some times that we are privy to and understand the way that we think. We call that metacognition. Sometimes we think about and understand the way that we think. All right. So sometimes, sorry about that. Sometimes some of us need reminders, right? And so what do? We set our alarm. All right, because some of us don't get up automatically, but some of us do, right? So some of us don't ever have to set an alarm. All right, some of us will tie a string around our finger, right, to remember. Some of us will write notes to remember. Some of us will use cue cards to remember, or note cards or something. Cue cards if we're on stage, I suppose, right? To remember. So why? Or some of us will sleep on it, or some of us will take the quiz right after we study. Why? Those are all strategies based on the way that we think that we learn material or understand material, right? So metacognition, over and above the way that we think. We think about thinking, all right? Or broader than thinking, meta. Okay. So what we also want to do is we also then want to try and be aware of what we are calling these introspective processes. So we think about the fact that we are sad or depressed, or think about the way that we handled some kind of an event in our lives, right? So we begin to use some, especially as we get older, introspective processes. We think about how we think about things or feel about things or experience things. All right, so all of those are introspective. I'm looking inside of myself to kind of try and understand how I work. The problem is that we can't always be privy to those internal processes and how they work. So it's important for us to try and discover them. And as psychologists, that's what we kind of do a lot. We kind of try and discover those processes. But what we've also discovered is there are some introspective processes that we just will not understand and that we are not privy to. All right? But what we can understand is that we have these biases or these tendencies, and they can lead us to truth, or they can lead us to lies that we have about ourselves. All right, so I have a whole series on self-esteem, and in that series, you can take a look at that. That's on my website, and you can take a look at that series because in that series, I do talk about biases in one of the episodes, and I also talk about cognitive dissonance as well. All right, so we're going to talk a little bit about that right now. So cognitive, all right, let me say one more last thing about this slide over here. So blatant lies can be getting out. All of these lies lead to misinformation. They lead to misinformation about other people, and they may even lead to misinformation about ourselves. Remember, when we're thinking about how we think about things, we are not always able to access all of our internal reasoning. And without the ability to access all of the internal reasoning, we may actually have misinformation about ourselves, right? So misinformation can be hidden from us, but it can also be blatant as well, right? We can purposefully try and mislead others into believing things that we want them to believe. And the same way with biases. Biases can be blatant biases in that we, for example, may be racist towards a group of people. We can call that a blatant bias. We don't very often see blatant biases or blatant prejudices, let's say, so that we feel negatively towards something or someone or a group of people. We don't very often see that played out openly, but it could be, couldn't it? I mean, we certainly did see blatant biases when it came to the truckers that were in Canada. And when we talked about Justin Trudeau's, what I called hate speech that he used against those truckers, that to me was a blatant bias. But what did people do about that? What did people do? It seemed to me that there wasn't a lot of media coverage or a lot of uproar about the hate speech that Justin Trudeau was using. He called those individuals who were unvaccinated and part of this unvaccinated movement misogynist, racist, and not to be tolerated. Individuals who are told of no matter what group, I just don't understand. I don't understand as a human being and part of the human race how you could say in any way, shape, or form to have it be acceptable that a group of people are not to be tolerated. I just don't understand how in any language, from any culture, from any moral background, that is acceptable speech for human beings, right? If I said to you that some animal, some breed of dog was not to be tolerated, there would be intolerance about that. There would be intolerance about that. And that's something we need to think about as well. Are we meeting intolerance with intolerance? Are we telling individuals that they are not to ostracize people who are of one camp while they are ostracizing people of another camp? We're going to talk about that today. We're going to talk about the blatant misinformation that leads to conflicts. We're not going to talk about specifics. However, when we are able to apply what I'm talking about to real life situations, we have a better understanding of it, right? And we have a better application of it. And that really helps us in the long run with both of those things, understanding and application. And right now, we need some good application in the real world of a lot of these things that we're talking about. Okay, all right. So that's all I wanted to talk to you about these blatant and hidden lies. Not too much information, but they can both misinformation and biases can both be blatant and they can be hidden. Biases, we have learned about many of these internal biases that we have, such as cognitive dissonance, as I have said. And so therefore they are no longer therefore they are no longer hidden. We understand them. Now, they may not be so out in the open, but they are also not completely hidden from us like they used to be, or like we used to think they used to be. Okay, all right. So, moving on now, we are going to talk a little bit about cognitive dissonance. And what is cognitive dissonance? Cognitive dissonance is an uncomfortable feeling that we have when our attitudes don't match our behaviors. And so what I am calling this is a natural mechanism by which we are able to feel literal balance within our bodies. All right. So cognitive dissonance, again, is this uncomfortable feeling that comes very naturally to all of us. In fact, we have taken a look to find out whether or not individuals across all cultures experience cognitive dissonance. And we do see that that is true. People across all cultures experience this uncomfortable feeling when attitudes don't match their behaviors. Now, there are different caveats depending on the cultures that we come from. Western cultures have a private cognitive dissonance. Eastern cultures have a more public cognitive dissonance. Now, that's not what I'm here to talk to you about. I'm here just to, I mention that to kind of give you an idea of the fact that when I'm talking about this internal mechanism that we have that tells us that there's an imbalance in our body, we can see that now relative to the mind. We have already talked about that in our last part one series, in our last series on a healthy body, where we feel an imbalance in our bodies. And that is then kicked into high gear with changes in our hormonal system as well as changes in our nervous system when we feel an imbalance that is driven by the hypothalamus. So if you recall, again, we have then therefore a mechanism by which we get our bodies into balance. And this cognitive dissonance is clearly a mechanism by which we get our minds into balance. Okay? All right. So, cognitive dissonance we experience, and we can take a look at that. PowerPoint that I have there, and you can see cognitive dissonance. Animal cruelty is wrong, but also so delicious, right? So that's an area of cognitive dissonance. We don't like the way that they treat animals, or, for example, maybe we could go ahead and say, well, animal cruelty, I can still eat meat. But let's make sure that they are from organizations that process the meat without cruelty to the animals. But still, then I have to pay a high price. So there's cognitive dissonance again, right? Maybe I feel cognitive dissonance now because I can't really afford to pay that for meat. And so how do I resolve cognitive dissonance? How do I resolve cognitive dissonance? And there are several ways to do this. One way is we can change our attitude, right? We can change our attitude. Well, it's kind of hard if we feel that animals are being mistreated and maybe we shouldn't eat meat because animals are being mistreated, and then to say, well, it's okay. Now, not everybody has the same values. That's not what I'm saying, right? But all I'm saying is if you have that value, it becomes very difficult for you to have a different attitude just to make it convenient for you to eat meat, for example, right? Okay, we can deny the effects. And that's what we see with misinformation right now. Blatant lies, denying the effects of something. So we could say and deny that no, individuals are actually, all these corporations are actually not doing committing cruelty to animals in the way that they board them, in the way that they feed them, in the way that they slaughter them. And we know, based on a lot of information, that that's likely not true. Now, it's also very difficult to say whether or not, and it also gets people in trouble whether or not they actually can blatantly say that there's animal cruelty going on in the way that we slaughter our animals. However, we do know that there are products that are being tested on animals, that kind of thing, right? The point here is this. The point here is that we can deny the facts that we have seen across the board, and in fact have a lot of reasons for corporations to deny facts and blatantly put out misinformation. But can we blatantly, as an individual, deny facts that we come to have known across the board, right? Is it easy? No, of course it's not easy to deny facts. And so what we typically do is we typically do what is called adding consonant information. Adding information that is consistent with my behavior, and that will make me feel better. And so some of those kinds of things can end up being things like, well, I can't afford it. Someday I will be able to afford to buy meat that is packaged and slaughtered organically, right? And with thought to animals. Someday I can afford that. So what I do is I add information. It's not that I disregard or blatantly become misinformed about the outcomes of all of these individuals eating meat, right? I can deny the blatant outcomes, but that's not an easy thing to do. That creates a lot of cognitive dissonance. And by the way, if we are capable of believing misinformation, well, what that does is it preps us for mental illness down the road. One of the ways that we are able to stay mentally sharp and less depressed and less anxious is when we avoid this kind of dissonance that occurs internally when we have inconsistencies. Again, we talked about that. It's important for the body because that's when we end up getting these stress indicators. And now we see it's important for the mind as well. Otherwise, we are preparing ourselves later on for mental illness. Our minds and our bodies cannot take the inconsistencies of lying. It's that clear. Our minds and our bodies cannot take on the inconsistencies of lying. And when we see individuals getting triggered, what we understand that to be then is a protection of ourselves against a wound, and more importantly, a lie that we believe. This is so critical. You need to really stay tuned because I'm going to get to the behavior that you engage in that you find regretful, that creates dissonance in you, that where you say, that's not the kind of person I am. Yet your behavior says differently, right? So we say actions speak louder than words. What if our words say one thing, but our actions say another? What that does is it creates unhealthy people, both in mind and in body. So please pay attention to what I'm telling you. How do we alleviate that cognitive dissonance? And by the way, Dr. Feravich, you're telling me that I believe lies about myself that are hidden. So how can I then become a healthy person? Please stay tuned. Please stay tuned. That is what I'm here to teach you. All right. So moving on. Again, this picture that I have here for you. Whoops, wrong one. This picture that I have here for you is just a reminder that I talk about biases and cognitive dissonance in my videos on self-esteem. And so you can see those videos on my website, or you can go to my YouTube channel. And don't forget, when you go to my YouTube channel, to make sure that you click on the like button. So like those. Hold on one second. Every time I start a new one, I gotta, Okay, so make sure that you like my videos. Make sure you subscribe to my YouTube channel, and make sure that you turn on the bell there, or the notices, so that you get notices. Also, what I hope that you do is one more thing, and that is share my videos. Share my videos. They are really important information, and some of the things that I have to say really are things that a minority of individuals have a voice about. So if we collectively get together, and if this is an important voice for you, then please make sure that you're sharing my videos with other individuals so that the voice gets heard by many. These are really trying times for all of us, and the voice that I want to be heard has nothing to do with my own self-interest. All right, so that's why it's important for you to get my videos out there. It has nothing to do, the voice that I want to be heard has nothing to do with my own self-interest. Well, of course there's some self-interest. Who am I, a saint? I don't think so. Okay, all right. So don't forget, take a look at my video series on self-esteem there. The first one is on cognitive dissonance. The second video in that series is on biases. All right. So part of a whole bunch of series that I have been doing for you, including love and sex in the 21st century, and also depression and behavior. And so now a healthy new you in 2022. So please pay attention if you would, and share and like those videos. Okay. Now, let's talk more specifically. About lies that we have. And here now we're going to take a look at it. Instead of blatant lies versus hidden lies, we're going to take a look at lies that we have about ourselves versus lies that we have about others. And the very first one is we want to take a look at lies that we have about others. All right. And you can see that what these lies do from that little picture that I have there, or that little graphic that I have there. Thank you, PowerPoint, for all those lovely graphics that you give me suggestions for and that I absolutely love. But as you can see from that little graphic that I have there, these lies make us feel as if we stand out from the crowd, right? We become ostracized because of these lies. And this goes to show you right here why it becomes so important to avoid these kinds of lies, right? Lies about others and lies that we have about ourselves. To avoid lies in general, it's important. Why is it so important? Because in either case, whether I believe them about other people or whether I believe them about myself, they ostracize me from the group. All right? Okay, so let's talk about lies that we have about other individuals. Lies that we have about others typically are things, and actually, I'm going to correct myself, okay? And that's what I get to do in these live videos, and then edit this part out. It really isn't about lies that we have about other people. It's not. Right? We do believe lies about other people, and that is certainly something that we have to examine. This is where we end up coming into things like stereotyping, prejudice, and discrimination. But that's not what I'm here to talk to you about. I'm not here to talk to you about those kinds of variables when we're talking about lies. So I'm not here to talk to you about lies that you have about other people. I'm here to talk to you about the lies that other people have about you. Now, we have to think about that very closely, right? The lies that this group of people have over here about you. We want to think about that very carefully, because what that does is again, makes us feel like we are ostracized from the rest of the group because they are believing something about us, and who knows how many people they've told, how that misinformation, that mischaracterization of you has caught on like wildfire by other people, right? There's no telling how much that has caught on. And so these again are what are we going to do about lies that other people have about ourselves? And the real fact of the matter and the truth of all of this is you can't do a lot about it other than we know that actions speak louder than words, right? There are all kinds of reasons why people might want to tell lies about you, right? All kinds of reasons. Maybe they are jealous of your talent or of your looks or of the way that you carry yourself or of your confidence. Maybe people are jealous or envious about those things about you, and that's why they tell lies. Maybe you've given them reasons to gossip about you. And so maybe what they're doing is in their little storytelling about you, maybe they embellish. So there's a grain of truth there, but they are embellishing, right? The best thing that we can really do is for when we are under the microscope of other people's criticism, the best thing that we can do is to live a good life, right? The best revenge is a good life. And so that is true, right? If somebody is mischaracterizing you, the ways that trigger us most are when they are mischaracterizing things that are personal attributes about ourselves, right? Things that we value about ourselves. Those are the things that hurt the most. So typically somebody might criticize your cooking, but that might not trigger you. It could though. It could if you value being a good cook. And if you then are being criticized by somebody who also values being a good cook. So some of those kinds of criticisms really can hurt us, right? So lies that individuals tell about us can also be not about our character. But most often the things that hurt us the most and also derail us the most are those lies that individuals tell us about our characters, or even those shortcomings. Because what triggers us, it's not when somebody tells us a blatant lie that becomes very obvious to everybody that it's a lie, right? So, Dr. Feravich colors her hair. Annette colors her hair. Well, you could see with your eyeballs, I'm not coloring my hair. You might say at one time I did, but you can see with your eyeballs I'm not, right? So there are lies that people could tell that are blatant lies that everybody can see is not the truth. But when those aren't the lies, again, that bother us, though, right? Because we can see blatantly what is true, and it makes you kind of look like a ding-dong when you're telling a lie that everybody around you knows to be a lie, knows to be false, right? Not the truth. When everybody around you does know the truth, then you look like a fool. But here, what we see here with this real strong, aggressive attack at or aggressive narrative that we have that is misrepresenting truth in so many ways that it actually becomes incumbent upon us even to recognize blatant lies, as we have said, right? But that's not typically, and actually we're bothered by these blatant lies. How can you openly and blatantly make this statement? So this is beginning to trigger us, these blatant lies that we are seeing more and more prevalent. But typically, it's the ones that we can't defend. A blatant lie I can defend. I could stand here and say, what do you think this gray is, right? What do you think that gray is? So I can stand here and very often defend a blatant lie, and therefore it doesn't start cooking in me, right? Enough to trigger something later on. It's those lies that I cannot very directly defend. If somebody says I'm a dishonest person, right, and then they give you a reason why that may be based on a seed of truth, but definitely is not the truth, how do you defend against that? Then what you sound defensive, because you begin to make up all of these reasons and rationale for why you behave that way. That's what triggers us. That's what gets us the most upset, is when we are having to defend a lie that is ambiguous, right? So, what do we need to learn about the idea that we cannot, or we have a hard time defending against lies that are less blatant about us? What can we do about that? And the fact of the matter is, not a lot. Not a lot. Why? Because lies that other people tell about us, environmental situations, other people, we don't have control over. We cannot control other people. And what is the trigger? What's the trigger? The trigger is my desire to control you. We talked about that last week. The trigger is my desire to get you, in this example, to stop telling lies about me. Okay? So, the problem is if somebody wants to tell you a lie, somebody wants to tell a lie about you, what are you going to do? This is an important lesson. It's an important lesson in understanding those things that we can control and those things that we can't control, right? It is part of the Serenity Prayer, which is a very, very beautiful prayer, right? God, help me to recognize those things that I can't control. Help me to have the courage to change those things that I can, and have the wisdom to know the difference, right? The wisdom to know the difference between those things I can control and those things that I can't control. And what we begin to learn is that the only things we can control typically is ourselves. Certainly there are certain events that we can control, right? There are certain events we can control. But the more that we try and control events, the more that we realize that we are ending up spending a lot of resources trying to control many things that we can't, right? This gets us crazy when we try and control events, right? Think about this all the way from, a young child who takes a toy away from somebody, right? From another child trying to get that toy, to a teacher who tries to control the behavior of a student in class by getting them to sit down and study quietly, right? Teenagers who try and control their relationships with other people and the feelings maybe that they have towards other people, but more to point, the feelings that other people have towards them, right? So we change our style and our character and the way we present ourselves in order to get those people to be more attracted to us. So we do try all throughout our stages in life to control other people. As parents, that's what we're trying to do, is control the behavior of our children so that they have, particular values and behaviors, of course, right? So There are always opportunities for us to try and control events and to control people. But what it ends up being is really an exercise in futility. And the idea is that we learn to control what we can control, which is basically ourselves. All right? So when we talk about lies that others tell about us, versus lies we believe about ourselves. Now, what are we focused on? I hope you already got it. We are focused on lies we believe about ourselves. Why? Because we can't control the other ones. That's why. Okay. Now, let's go also back to the idea that then, therefore, we can believe blatant lies about ourselves, and we can also believe hidden lies about ourselves. Now, the hidden lies are the ones that we are going to really focus on for our therapy. As you can see, I'm taking a couple other notes here. The hidden lies are the ones that we're going to focus on for our therapy, because those are the ones that need to be uncovered, all right? And we uncover these over time. It's not something that we can find when we are uncovering these lies. I just recalled what was the graphic I wanted was the onion, right? The graphic of the onion. As we begin to do introspection and discover our triggers and examine those triggers, what we end up doing is removing the layers, like the layers of an onion, so that we can discover our hidden lies. That's what we do in therapy. And I will tell you again, my therapy is very unique. I do not accept insurance. And the reason why I don't accept insurance is because you just simply can't go through the same traditional kinds of mental health treatment and use the traditional methods and be able to get this kind of training and advice in therapy. All right, so doesn't happen at this level just because of all the red tape. It just doesn't happen at this level for really good therapy and for this kind of therapy. I'm sorry that is the case. Okay, all right. So but there are so many avenues to be able to get this kind of therapy free. And also, I just want to tell you this. It's not because people are trying to sell you their spirituality, their God narrative. No. What I'm doing here is one thing. I know all three of those elements are important for good health. They are. And not one of them do I recognize as being more important than the other one. We have a human element and we have a spiritual element. And both of those are equally important. If you're a spiritual person, you realize that there is a purpose to your human element. And so therefore it is the yin and the yin and the yang of this, right? It is, your, peanut butter to my jelly, whatever, however you want to say it, right? We need both of these. We need all of these things in order for us to really be able to take an effective strategic look at taking control over our minds and our bodies. And we'll talk about that control thing with our spirit, which is kind of interesting, all right? Kind of handing our control over to the powers that be. Real scary stuff, but not unusual. Eastern spirituality, Western spirituality, we all do it, and we've done it across time. It is not something that has been all of a sudden appeared in order to make us feel better. Concepts of God, higher powers, of heaven, right? These aren't something that we see erupted over time in order to make a depressed people feel better, which is what evolution would suggest should have happened, right? That over time we found a need for this kind of idea, and we see where it sprung up in time. No, didn't happen that way. It hasn't happened that way as far as we know, all right? Not my area of research, although don't think I don't research all that stuff in spirituality. Okay. All right. Let's continue to move on. So what are we saying? We are saying that there are blatant and hidden lies that we have about ourselves. My therapy helps you uncover, like the layers of an onion, the hidden lies that you believe about yourself. And these hidden lies are lies that are the basis, the foundation, the cause of your triggers. Wow. Wow. You mean to tell me, Dr. Feravich, you know my lies are the cause of my triggers? What? Well, then what the heck are my lies? Right? Get into it. Okay, so now this is my slide that is showing you a slippery slope that I have here, right? So lies cause a slippery slope. The lies that others believe about ourselves can cause this slippery slope of anger and rumination and self-monitoring and adjustments in self-esteem. Those are the outcomes of lies that others believe about us, right? Lies that others believe about us. The outcomes are that we end up ruminating and falling down this slippery slope of anger, retaliation, over and wasted resources over things that we cannot control. And we see here a slippery slope as well for those lies that we believe about ourselves. It's a slippery slope as well, because what that does is it creates reasons for and sort of weak spots for feelings of depression and feelings of anxiety. So we really want to get to those lies we believe about ourselves. All right? Okay. And again, some of these are blatant lies, right? Some of these actually are blatant lies. How can we tell that we are believing a blatant lie about ourselves? We're going to get into this more, but a lot of this has to do with our self-talk. If you want to know about some of the blatant lies that you believe about yourself, maybe this week what you do is every single time that you hear yourself mention negative speak about yourself. Negative speak about yourself. That was so stupid. I can't believe I stinking did that. How have I not learned after all of this time? And what I want you to do is I want you to start writing those down. That's going to be a real challenge for you to learn and believe that those are lies. But you have to have examples in front of your face. Because if you come to me and you say, well, Dr. Feravich, that really does make sense. Everything you're saying makes sense. Those are lies. I'm learning to not believe those kinds of lies about myself. And then you go home and you have this negative self-talk. I'm so stupid. Nobody's ever going to love me again, right? I am never going to learn to manage my money. I'm never going to have money. When you begin to say these things and put those things from another kind of area of whatever, put those things out in the universe, for example, what you really need to be aware of is writing down all those things so we can discuss why those are lies, right? Really. We want the hard stuff. You mean to tell me, Dr. Feravich, if I've been using drugs my whole life, I stole from my parents in order to use drugs, you're going to tell me that my bad feelings about myself are lies. That's what you're going to tell me. Stay tuned. Stay tuned. And oh, by the way, this is not some liberal attempt at shirking our responsibilities for our behaviors. That's not it. Trust me. What this therapy does is it makes you take responsibility for your behaviors in a way that doesn't damage you, in a way that gives you strength. What if you go through programs like AA that have a belief in a higher power, for example, what they also have and this is a very successful program, they also have a section or a step. I shouldn't say section, I should use the right language. They have a step, and the 4th step is looking at your character flaws, your character defects. Why? Why? Isn't that going to make me more depressed? Isn't that going to make me more anxious when I look at those things? What we are doing is looking at truth. We want to know the truth. We want to know, where am I a screw up and need to take responsibility? And where am I a struggling human being that could improve if I take responsibility? It is about responsibility. It is about character defects that I take an honest look at. But in this therapy, it's a little different than the AA 12 steps, because our character defects amount to 2 character defects. And we really need to stay tuned for what those are, and then learn how we're supposed to attack those 2 character defects. 2, that's it. Okay, so what I want to do is I want to be able to get us closer to recognizing what we might also see as truth, because that, of course, is important for us to lead mentally healthy lives. One of the things that I have been talking to you a little bit about is what happens in the short term with believing lies, and what happens in the long term. What happens when they're blatant lies, what happens when they're hidden lies. One of the things that happens when we continue to believe blatant lies is what we do is we compromise our mental health later on. Think about when we buy into these lies by convincing ourselves over time that they are truth. We have already said that it bothers our bodies, right? It bothers our bodies. It creates an imbalance in our bodies, and it creates cognitive dissonance or an imbalance in our minds. And both of those, an imbalance in my mind creates an imbalance in my body, because my body feels that cognitive dissonance and it reacts in the same way as an imbalance. It reacts by releasing our hormones, cortisol, and those are our stress hormones. It also reacts by releasing or activating our sympathetic nervous system, and that's where our anxiety comes in, right? So we've got a feeling of we've got negative feelings, right? Or at least fearful feelings flowing through our bodies. And then we also have this bodily reaction to it. And all of that has to do with this imbalance. Now, what I want to talk to you about here is, again, that as we begin to believe some of these lies that are hidden and they are blatant, what they end up doing is they change our bodily chemistry. And so we really do have a need for our health to seek out real truth. Now, what I've been coming across over the last couple weeks, last month or so, is some of these blatant strategies that have been used to mislead individuals. And I have said that what they are doing is purposefully creating chaos, and more importantly, now creating really great conflict against people who are of like minds and like citizens, right? So we are the American people, and yet we are becoming greatly divided, and there are strategies to this. Now, I've got this slide up, and I'm going to open up the slide again, and we're going to talk a little bit about this slide. But the thing I want to tell you about this as far as conflict goes is that these are strategies for conflict that have been discovered in the 1980s. So, to suggest that the powers that be don't realize that these strategies will create conflict is simply believing in something that is untrue. The powers that be know clearly and are actually engaging in every one of these strategies in order to create divisiveness and conflict. So, what does this have to do with lies and truth? Well, let's take a look at these strategies and how these strategies then can promote things like both misinformation and biases. Okay? So what we see here are 6 different strategies that end up resulting in escalation of conflict. All right. So we can see there that the first one says uncertainty leads to certainty or a commitment. How does this occur in conflict situations? Well, if I am in a conflict with you because, for example, you attack me, all right, for whatever reason, let's say that you think that my behavior was inappropriate at the wedding last weekend, and so you attack my behavior. What am I going to naturally do? What I'm going to naturally do is begin to line up my facts, right? I'm going to begin to line up my facts to say, well, you've done worse. This behavior wasn't so inappropriate, right? And whatever the behavior is, whatever it is, you are going to become certain, more certain. Under attack, we become more defensive, and in our defensiveness, we become more certain about our behavior, our position, that we are right. And even if we don't really 100% believe, for example, that our appropriate wasn't, we don't believe that it was 100% appropriate, we are not going to let you know of that uncertainty. Why? Because you put me under attack. When I'm under attack, it's not time for discussion. It's not time for understanding. It is time for things like retaliation, or it is time for things like defensiveness, or it's time for things for me to like shooting facts out, right? All right, so let's keep moving on this. So when we are under duress, under attack, in conflict, uncertainty becomes commitment. Think about our uncertainty that we had started with our commitment to the Ukrainians, right? At first, we were uncertain, but as the conflict develops, we become more committed to one stance over another. It is not time for debate or discussion. And I'm not saying it's not time. What I'm saying is under conflict, under duress, that's not when we get conversations done. We commit to our side. You can see here that under conflict, perception leads to misperception. So if I am not under duress, as we talked about last week, when I am not being triggered, I can think more clearly about things. And so cognitions are higher when I am not under duress, right? But if I am emotionally drained or strained or emotionally feel elevated, my thinking doesn't work as well. So we begin to misperceive. So now information starts coming out there, right, as if it is science, as if it's certain, as if it is fact, for example. And because I don't have the time, as you are shooting all this information out towards me, to make the right perceptions, because I'm under strain and duress, what do? I begin to believe wrong facts, right? Misperceptions. I begin to believe, understand, read more about my side, and begin to engage in understanding and processing misinformation. Okay, let me check this out here. It should be like this. Okay. Number 3, soft tactics lead to hard tactics. And we see this going on with all kinds of things, right? So, soft tactics. Let's talk about the science that's involved and let people make their own health decisions. Soft tactics, hard tactics, mandating, right? Shutting down that trucker's convoy by taking away their gasoline in the cold. Those are hard tactics. In conflict, we replace this kind of conversation and willingness to tolerate with exactly what Justin Trudeau called not to be tolerated. Hard tactics. Reciprocity, I'm willing to give a little bit, cooperate with you, and you give a little bit, you cooperate with me. And this doesn't have to just be cooperation. It can be sharing of information. It can be sharing of resources, right? Reciprocity, we are sharing. And reciprocity turns into retaliation. Think about this from, again, a young child's perspective, right? What does a young child do if you took her toy? She takes another toy, a bigger toy, or she slaps you, right? Or she what? She annies up. She gets it. She one-ups you. She makes it just a little bit worse. He or she. Right? So we no longer are trying to work with one another, right? And reciprocate with one another. Your sad story, my sad story. This is all empathy is what we're talking about. So instead of empathizing with one another, we retaliate. And think about that. If I moments ago was empathizing with you and we were sharing wonderful things, you might have shared something vulnerable with me, right? That I am now using against you. And imagine what that does to the relationship as well. Okay. The next one then, irritation turns to anger. So when you retaliate, I used to be mildly bothered by you. Now I'm pretty angry. Now I am being triggered by you. And then the last one there that creates greater conflict or an escalation in conflict is few leads to many. And what this is that a few people may share my ideas, and I'll be okay with that. They're my ideas. They're my values. And as long as somebody isn't infringing on my values, then I don't need to make a coalition. But when you begin to use hard tactics, use misinformation, right? When you become committed to the things you're saying and doing, I might also need to build a coalition in order for me to get my information out. And so the few who I needed on my side, because it didn't matter because you weren't attacking me, becomes many that I need on my side because you are attacking me. And now, oh my gosh. All right, hold on just a minute. I'm on my YouTube show.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, come on in. Holy smokes, you didn't tell me. I didn't know you were coming.
I've called you like 18 times. I've left you 5 messages.
Oh, sweetie, I'm so sorry. Shut the door. Come on in. All right, you guys, I'm just finishing up my YouTube show. I'm literally on my YouTube show right now. Let me finish it up. It'll give me 5 minutes, okay?
Yep.
All right, so as you can see, I have visitors here, and I'm just going to let you know. Lucy, I'm just going to let you know that this is my best friend that I have told you about, and I visited her this past weekend in Fremont, and she left her purse in my car, so she came to get her purse. So I'm going to wrap this up in 2 minutes so that I can visit with my friend. All right, the last slide I wanted to talk about is just how does this conflict end up leading to later on to trust. And you know what? I'm going to pick that up. All right, all right, now. All All right, shh, Janelle, I'm online over here. Okay, all right, I will finish this up with you guys.
Get that right through here and then go out the door to the.
Okay, all right, I am wrapping up now, and I will finish the rest of this next week on Sunday when we talk about the 2 different lies. So this will be great for me to pick up with the outcomes of lies. We're going to talk about what truth does for us, and that's all that I have for you this Sunday. Thank you for joining me. This is Dr. Annette Feravich with Healthy Mind, Body, Spirit, and you can find me on the internet at www.healthymindbodyspirit.net. All right, so hopefully I will see you next Sunday, and we will be talking about the 2 different lies that we believe. So we're going to be focusing on only 2 lies we believe. All right, folks, that's it. Thank you so much for joining me. Okay, I'm not recording anymore. I've got and she loved us because she had 2 boys, and the owners before, which is just a stupid reason. And the
Yeah.
owners before her had 2 boys, so we would be the
Oh, yeah,
next.
everyone's raising.
Exactly,
Yeah.
in this house, and that was it. And third owner of this house,
Yeah.
and with 2 boys, and so she liked us stuff right off the bat. We said, we gave her a number. We said this is what we could afford to pay for it. She goes, okay.
Oh, there you go. I know, can you believe it? It was really awesome.
Yeah, let me go grab the mighty real quick, and then we can burn one.
Okay,
Oh.
and I got my stuff too. I
Oh, no,
like
it's
more
keep
your
it.
stuff.
No, keep it. It literally, it does not even matter.